So you've just purchased a new BFS reel, you picked out the rod you think is going to work perfectly for your style of fishing. Maybe you spent 60 bucks on a great budget combo, you know, something like this. But maybe you spent 10 times that. No matter how much your gear costs, there's one factor that every fisherman needs to really understand: using the right line. Picking the wrong line can take a day that is filled with anticipation and fill it with frustration, or even worse, despair. That feeling when a potential personal best breaks off.
Oh man, I don't know what the heck I got here, but I got something seriously. Oh, I don't know what the hell I hooked, but that was incredible.
You don't want to feel that. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how to choose a braided line that will transform your BFS fishing, casting further, catching more, and losing fewer fish. My name is Aaron, and if you happen to be new to my videos, I search the mountains of Pennsylvania and West Virginia looking for great places to fish with my BFS gear. Finesse is all I do, so I've tried a lot of finesse lines. But first, what exactly is BFS fishing? BFS is short for Bait Finesse System. It uses shallow spooled bait casters that allow you to use light line, finesse techniques to target highly pressured or simply finicky fish. Most of what I throw are lures that typical bass anglers would throw on spinning gear, or in extreme cases a fly rod.
Nice rainbow trout. Got him on the fly.
Perhaps the easiest way to think of it is this: it's fishing with ultralight bait casting gear. That's an oversimplification, but that's kind of what it is. So why does the line choice matter? Well, honestly, except for the hook, the line is the only thing that connects you to the fish. We've all felt the heartbreak of a line snapping on a big fish. For me, using good line is just as important as a good drag on the reel and the right action on a rod. So typically there are three common types of fishing lines: monofilament, also known as mono, fluorocarbon or fluoro, and braid, often called PE. Let me cut straight to the chase. I think braid is best for BFS. Why? Well, it's much thinner for a rated strength than other options, so you can spool a little more of the braid on a shallow BFS spool. Because it's thinner, it typically casts further. Its low memory keeps it from creating those annoying coils of line as it comes off the reel. It's also more sensitive, transmitting those light bites more easily. Now, last spring, my biggest largemouth came on a bite that was nearly imperceptible on even the best rod and great braid while fishing a hover rig that just slowly fluttered to the bottom. That giant bass just inhaled it as it floated past its face. But I felt the tick and I set the hook. Now, the two biggest drawbacks of mono and fluoro are the larger diameter, compared to braid at least, and their tendency to develop that memory while on the spool. So those little loops of line, they can sap some of your distance. They also affect, for me, the way I read it when I'm doing finesse fishing and I'm watching the line, but it could also lead to more knots or bird nests. Both are more abrasion resistant than braid, and mono is definitely cheaper on average. But I have a few great budget braid options I'm going to share with you that might be cheaper than the mono you're buying. Fluoro is supposedly nearly invisible to fish underwater. It sinks, mono and braid float. This isn't really good or bad, but it's just worth knowing, especially when considering leader material. So with that, let's talk about the two biggest disadvantages of braid and what I do to overcome them. Braid has relatively low abrasion resistance. This is why most folks use a leader. If you use fluoro for your leader, now you also get the benefit of the visibility of low visibility of the line. Braid has virtually zero stretch. While this sounds like a good thing, you typically want a bit of give for two reasons. The first is to avoid ripping the bait away from the fish's, or even just out of a fish's mouth. If you've ever had a day of just missing tube bites or topwater bites, this was probably part of the problem. You're just setting the hook too quickly or too aggressively. That's usually my problem, and braid typically exaggerates that. And second, when a fish changes direction and goes on a run, that stretch acts as a bit of a shock absorber to prevent a break-off. Both of these scenarios are part of why I typically use a softer action rod with a more parabolic bend. And last, that thin diameter, it can be a challenge when tying knots. 7-pound braid is basically as thin as a hair. With all that out of the way, what are the top braided lines to use? A few years ago, I started to have these weird break-offs and random bird's nests, and I realized I needed to take a harder look at the line I was using. That's when I discovered this website called the Line Laboratory. With just a couple clicks, I discovered they have tested over 125 different lines. Now, after that initial moment of overwhelm, I started digging into the data. As a BFS guy, I could immediately discard all the lines that were stronger than about 15-pound test or so. So, just get that out of here. So that dropped the list of lines down to about 25. And after looking at the data and searching the web for availability, this is my list of lines that I've tried and liked over the last few years. So the first is Varivis. Honestly, just about anything Varivis. I like the Area Super Trout Master Limited. Unfortunately, the pink that I like seems to be discontinued. They make a Bait Finesse X4, which is great. And then Varivis 8 is really the highest rated line, but I haven't tried it yet. It's rated the number 2 braid out of all braided lines, not just these finesse ones. So what are the pros and cons of Varivis? The Varivis lines, they offer great visibility. The Bait Finesse X4, it matches my Kistler Hunt Series rods nicely, so I kind of like that. Downside is they're often sold in 75 meter spools, so that basically means I get one reel filling. That makes it expensive. You know, and when you have 20 reels like I do, that price really adds up sometimes. So the next line that I could recommend is Daiwa Dura Sensor. Now I originally bought the Dura Sensor Geckobejan with my Geckobejan reel. I've only seen the Geckobejan in pink. The regular Dura Sensor, it's available on high vis green and multicolor. This is the number 15 rated line out of the entire list. It's felt like the best casting line I've had on both the Aldebaran and the Geckobejan. Unfortunately, it's not available in the States as far as I found, and it's typically around $18 for 200 meters. But that means that for the same price as one reel of Varivis, I can fill 4 with the Dura Sensor. So this might become my go-to line in the future, but number 4 on this list, I still need to experiment with a little bit more before I really say that. And quite frankly, if they made the Varivis 8 in pink or a color that I liked, I'd probably use it a lot more. So next up is the Sunline Siglon ADV. I switched to this based on these test results. It's the number 11 rated line overall. My FG knots definitely seem to be better than this with any other line. The Line Labs testing showed a break strength of 130% of the rated for the FG knot and 81% of the max, and so that's fantastic. Now the downside of the Siglon is the color availability, because they only have blue and multicolor, and it seems like it was recently replaced by the Siglon AMZ, which I haven't tried, but it ties it at the number 11 rank. It has a lower tensile strength, but it has a higher abrasion resistance. And again, with the leader, I think it's fine. The good news is the ADV is on clearance from Sunline America for $9 a spool. So that's kind of like filling your reels for about $3 each. That's a pretty good deal. Now the last one is Suffix 832. Their ranking showed as really high for FG knot, the breaking strength versus the rated, that is, but it also tests at nearly 2.5 times its rated strength, which puts it at number 36 overall, and it's honestly not something that I like. So if it's a 10-pound line, it's testing out close to 25-pound breaking strength. So that can put a lot of stress on the rest of your system. So why is it on the list? Well, for one is color variety. They offer a lot of different colors, including my favorite, pink. If you want to see a video on why I think pink is the best color, mention it down in the comments. But the other one is accessibility. It's readily available at most US tackle retailers, which is where a bulk of you guys live. And it's also slightly more affordable, especially if you have to pay shipping from Japan for the other options. I haven't tried it yet, but I have used a lot of Suffix lines on my spinning gear for years with no issues. Just be aware, it has that much higher breaking strength than rated. Now the positive to that is you'll likely always break your leader at the lure instead of breaking it off at the knot, so that can be a good thing. Now one other line I want to talk about real quick before I get into the budget options is Daiwa J-Braid Grand. At this point, I don't recommend it. A couple of years ago, on this channel you would have seen me using it and talking about it all the time. I used it for an entire year, but I really had some weird breakoffs and knot failures, and it seemed like some spools were great and other ones aren't. So it turns out the 8-pound J-Braid Grand that I liked is rated number 122 out of 128 lines tested. I mean, that's not good, right? There are literally 100 better choices. Names like Power Pro and Cast King are a couple of names below it. But it's cheap, it's available on Amazon, so a lot of people use it. Just know that you can do a lot better, including some of these budget lines that I'm going to talk about from AliExpress here in just a moment. Now, if you've been paying attention and you have sharp eyes, you might have said, hey, why haven't you tried the Gliss Monotex? It's the number 1 rated line. Well, I haven't found it in pink. The lightest line tests well. All the other ones are average at best. So I kind of doubt their consistency. It's kind of like J-Braid to me. I've been talking about all these premium type lines, but what if you want to go with something a little bit more budget friendly? I got you covered. So option number 1, Kingdom Microfly. I've probably bought 8 or 10 spools of this. It's very inexpensive, typically somewhere around $3 a spool. It's got 4 colors, including pink. Comes in orange, green, and also a white. It's also the number 1 rated line for FG knot strength, and it's number 28 overall. It's also extremely accurate in its rating. So if you buy 7-pound Microfly, it breaks around 7 pounds. which I think may make people believe it kind of sucks, because you have stuff like Power Pro 8 that rated at 2.5 or 3 times its rated breaking strength. But microfly, it's not without its downsides. One is abrasion resistance. It's so poor that you have to use a leader. Even tying direct to the lure with this stuff is an issue. And the other one is color fastness. It will fade fairly quick. But hey, it's $3. It's an even better deal than this one at $9, because you can get 2. So that's $1.50 a reel. That's a pretty good deal. Now, budget option number 2 is the MyFine Demon Strong. I haven't used this one, but I was surprised when doing my research on this video that it came up ranked number 17. It appears they only have this high-vis Demon Green, and it also rates number 4 for knot strength, so that could be a good choice. The last budget option is the Handing Blast 8. Line Laboratory hasn't tested it, but I used this a good bit last year on a couple of setups, and I had no issues. I think it might be a bit stronger than its rating, similar to a lot of other braids, and it doesn't cast quite as far as the top tier lines in my experience. The line is your connection to the fish. Don't skimp on your choice of line and just use whatever. And don't assume that because it has a big name like Daiwa that it's actually any good. Talked about braid to leader. I haven't done a deep dive on leader lines, but I almost always use a fluoro leader. I've been using the Seaguar Red almost exclusively until I started doing some testing of Kistler's new fluoro lines last year, which actually seem to be really good. They're made in Germany. They're called Guten Tag. I use the 8-pound and the 12-pound from Kistler, and 6-pound and 12-pound from Seaguar. I also have a little bit of Invisex and a couple other things from Seaguar that I mess around with every once in a while. If you want to see a deeper dive on fluoro, let me know. I'll see what I can do. Line Laboratory hasn't done a ton of testing on that, so it'll probably require me to do a little bit of that on my own. And if you suck at tying FG knots like I do, then the Daiichi Seiko Knot Assist is worth its weight in gold. Let me know if you want to see a video about this little tool, and I'll work one up for you. So as far as knots, I do recommend the FG knot. It's not easy to tie, but that's why I use this. Many people like an Alberto knot. The main challenge is you need a small enough knot to pass through the micro guides on most BFS rods. I've also used a surgeon's knot in a pinch as well, like when I lose my knot assist tool or forget it at home. That's a list of 7 lines I recommend, and I guess 1 or 2 that I don't. Sorry, Braid. If you don't like my opinions, check out the Line Laboratory yourself. They have a YouTube channel. They also have a few test results for mono and fluoro. If you found this helpful, hit that thumbs up. Maybe subscribe if you want to see more finesse fishing content. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Really, that's it. Go fishing or something.